During a blood moon lunar eclipse, the light of the moon will be completely covered by the Earth's shadow. Metaphorically, this symbolizes the triggering of trapped emotions, the stirring of unconscious behaviors, and the awakening of the soul. When in Aquarius, sudden, shocking, and disruptive shifts can occur in our mindset and worldview. We can awaken to new realities and see things in the collective that we previously ignored. With that said, the energetic flow of this lunation will be advantageous, creating a tailwind for those poised for change. The cosmic message here is overwhelmingly positive, supportive, and nourishing for the human collective. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community, where we discuss 13-sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior and the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the blood moon lunar eclipse in Aquarius in a series of trines involving Jupiter, Hades, Kronos, Poseidon, and the star Sirius. We will also examine the Sun's conjunction with Mercury in Leo. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share, and subscribe. There's a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
Now, I have looked at the chart and there is indeed a lot going on at this beautiful full moon lunar eclipse in Aquarius. So what would you like to give us as an overview?
Yeah, where do I start? Disruptive and spectacular is what this is likely to be, both actually visually and energetically as well, for those that can see it. These are pretty phenomenal looking events. And in fact, the last time, I'm not absolutely sure on this because of the 13th sign and the 12th sign, but the last time that a full lunar eclipse occurred in this position, I think was way back in 1979. So it's been a long time in the cosmic baking tin, if you like. So disruptive and spectacular is two words that I would use to describe this, and I would encourage you, if you're able to go out and see it. The moon will be completely covered by the Earth's shadow under a full lunar eclipse. So when we look at the archetypes, the moon archetype is that of emotions and of course the unconscious mind, whereas the Earth represents our physical presence and our temporal existence. So when you get these two coming together, that lunation will be deeply experienced both in our physical bodies, but also in nature itself. This is likely then to trigger trapped emotions, karmic loops, latent soul memories, and the shadow aspects that we all have. The shadow are those aspects of self that we consider to be undesirable, to be unworthy and unacceptable. We repress, we hide, and we deny that they exist, these pieces of ourselves. And we do that through a process of behavior modification. So in other words, we fit in to get along. Traits like aggression, like selfishness, guilt, shame, and even unlived potential and desires, all of that exists in the shadow self and is likely to be triggered. These sorts of things. The shadow refers to the hidden aspects that will be brought to our conscious awareness to help us achieve authenticity, to help us come into alignment with our divine design, as you said in the intro, to help us unearth and activate our passion, our purpose, and our path. This is an opportunity, this lunation, and of course eclipses can last 3 to 6 months. So we're talking pretty much at least through to the end of the year. and maybe even through to the first quarter of next year that we'll still feel the effects of this. But their hidden aspects will be brought to conscious awareness over that time frame. And when that happens, we have an opportunity to integrate these disowned aspects of our nature that impede our confident self-expression. A blood moon symbolizes powerful transformation, endings, and spiritual awakenings. And it's often tied to karmic baggage and the unveiling of hidden truths. In other words, we go through a process of realization and revelation. So this can, on an individual level and on a collective level, represent intense release from old patterns, emotions, and limitations. And when that process unfolds, we create the space for profound personal and collective growth with the emergence of new perspectives. This is a potent time for self-reflection, for shedding the past, for embracing our inner wisdom. It is the closing of a cycle and the beginning of a new phase. It is a time when illusions will be unveiled. It is also a time for us to explore the darker aspects of our nature, to process difficult emotions like anger and grief and resentment. Historically, blood moons have been omens of significant change and prophetic events. And many cultures, indigenous particularly, see the blood moon as an expression of divine power, and it's a celestial sign that signals impending change.
Change from all the chaos that's happening now, or perhaps you as a person are ready for some big changes in your life. When you just get stuck, like when you are not, I think there's a saying, if you're not scared of your dreams, then those dreams are not big enough. So perhaps you've been contemplating a change and this could be the perfect time. So just for those wanting to know where some of the celestial bodies are located, we have the moon sitting at 17 degrees Aquarius. Because it's a full moon, the sun sits on the opposite side at 26 degrees Leo. So how would you interpret that Aquarian energy combined with this full moon?
Of course, Aquarius is an air sign, and therefore this is specifically relating to thought, to beliefs and philosophies. There's an expression, as we think, so we are. And you and I have talked about this, and when you're reflecting on Brené Brown and all the things that she talks about, our language absolutely defines our reality. So we're in this area of language and thought and communication. That's the focus, that's the context, that's the background for this lunar eclipse. The way that we describe any experiences creates a cognitive map. The guardian of Aquarius is Uranus, and that represents lightning, metaphorically, which in this context would mean the activation of neural pathways, some of which may not have been enlivened for a while. So in other words, we could get these sudden awakening experiences. There will definitely be an agitation of the collective unconscious as well, what I call the hive mind. I mean, Aquarius is related to, yes, it's the mind, but it's the mind of the collective as well as the mind of the individual. So we start with the idea that this change is going to happen first to our personal perspective. And our personal perspective on whatever situation we're looking at is what gives rise to our visions, our values, and our virtues. And these values and virtues, these visions of how the world should be, colour how we interact with our individual communities and the collectives with which we are all a part. We're all involved in groups of people that come together which are very Aquarian, whether it be the workplace, whether it be a sports club, whether it be something else, a knitting group, there's various groups and communities and collectives, the school boards getting together, this sort of thing. We're all interacting with these communities and collectives, these Aquarian groups, but we bring to them our individual perspectives. So therefore, the core of this blood moon is our worldview. It's our personal paradigm. It's our beliefs upon which we stand and fall. And when we are talking about an awakening or a transformation in those areas, that personal transformation starts always with self-awareness, a willingness to confront who we are, who we're being, to even explore the dark corners of our minds. That would be part of the Aquarian energy with a blood moon. The Gemini energy, which is Gemini and Mercury, of course, the sun being opposite and conjunct with Mercury, and those four planetary bodies you described before are all together in Gemini. So there's an enormous amount of air energy, of communication energy, of thinking energy here. It's almost overemphasized, if you like. But on the basis of that, we need to understand what our beliefs are, that which we stand and fall, that which we fall back on, especially when under pressure, and then how that affects and ripples out into the collective of Aquarius. The Sun conjunct Mercury in Leo and four planetary bodies in conjunction in Gemini itself. They've been Jupiter, Kronos, Hades, and Star Sirius, all been in a trine to the moon. This is a signal to be involved and engage in open communication, whether it be within small groups or whether it be over social media platforms or digital platforms where there's some interaction. That's the key, is that there's a communication element to this, and there's a broadcasting element to this as well. But talking about what we're feeling, what we're sensing, what's going on is absolutely signaled here. A key also when we're looking at this blood moon, and remember that the light of the moon will be covered, right? It'll go into the shadow for an hour or so. What that also signals to us is that we need to identify how and why we are triggered. And we need to isolate what those emotional catalysts are. What sends us off in a blind rage? What causes us to be defensive in the way that we're interacting with others? In what ways and how do we dig in and become really stubborn emotionally? Where are we emotionally hardened? Where are, or is there in our lives, and also in the collective, but we always start with ourselves if we want to be the change we want to see in the world, being the key. But what we're looking at is, where is there a hardening of emotions? Where is there a calcification of ideas? Where is there rigidity in our thinking? Where have we as individuals and the collective become inflexible? We must consider, when any time there's air signs involved, but in this specific context, what is the impact of our biases and our preferences when we are interacting with the collective? You see, we all have rose-tinted glasses to some extent. We all have blind spots. We all have favorite issues. We all have hobby horses. We all have things that we want to stand up and shout from the rooftops about. And there are other things that we don't dare touch. There are other issues that we just won't go near. All of that is coming to the surface. So the key channels, if you like, for Aquarian and Gemini energy are both in real life, but also via social media. And this therefore involves our digital relationships as well as those person-to-person in real life relationships.
And it would be amazing if you're able to have relationships in both aspects of life, in real life and social media, because we all know these keyboard warriors who can say anything they like using just some fingers on the keyboard, but when it comes to seeing them face to face, they wouldn't dare saying certain things that they've said online. And so I think it's really important that everyone has both. And if you feel really isolated in life now, I know someone who's just moved to Nelson, and it's like, how do I find new people? How can I find my new tribe? And most of us, I know there are exceptions, but most of us do enjoy spending time in real life with people. So if you're feeling isolated, maybe this is a time to just come up with some new ideas and just try them out, whether it's a potluck, whether it's a games night, whether it is hiking up a hill in your neighborhood and just and put the call out. Use social media to find those in real life people to combine the two. That's something that I'm thinking about at the moment as well. So we have conjunctions, oppositions, squares, and trines. And trines are one of the very few relationships within an astrological chart that are positive. It feeds each other in a positive way. And so the moon is sitting in Aquarius, and then it makes a trine with the stellium in Gemini. And just to reiterate what David already said, we have fixed star Sirius, then we have Kronos and Hades, and also Jupiter. So the first thing that comes to mind is Jupiter is just going to expand all these great energies that are coming together. What else would you like to say about this stellium?
Yeah, no doubt. And Jupiter is like the sun; it shines, doesn't matter what's going on. So everything can be amplified, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. But yeah, excuse me, as you say, the four planetary bodies in a trine. We mentioned right at the beginning that this is incredibly positive, and it's a tailwind, a pretty big tailwind as well. Pilots love tailwinds. You can just coast along. So they are. This is a push from the cosmos coming through. You've touched on Jupiter's amplification and the expansion of the experience that we have individually and collectively at this time. So there could be, of course, with Jupiter involved, but also the Sun conjunct Mercury in Leo, we could see emotional meltdowns, or you as an individual could see emotional meltdowns in and around you. There could be stress in the collective. A Sun conjunct Mercury could lead to loud, brash, arrogant, and overbearing communication, and that could be within the family, or it could be on the public stage as well. Drama is a word that comes to mind. Heightened anxiety, as I said before, in the collective, that manifests through leaders. The Sun, Leo, Mercury, the Leo energy bringing the leadership piece through, as does Kronos and Poseidon as well. So there's a lot of focus on the leaders here. So it wouldn't surprise, and remember that lunar eclipses, as we interpret it, solar eclipses the same, but particularly when they are full eclipses, you get this amplification effect when we talk about Jupiter that can last 3 to 6 months. So if this is taking place on the 7th or 8th of September, then we're looking through to at least the 7th or 8th of December 2025, and then even further, the very tail end of it could still be affecting us collectively and us individually right through to March next year. So this is a powerful, powerful time. And in that time window of the next 3 to 6 months, there could be pronouncements, and I'm talking about from public figures here. Big pronouncements, big decrees, big rulings, big judgments, big decisions that are being made that involve the collective or impact the collective. Hades in Gemini supports the transformation. So if we think about Hades as an octave, or Hades and Pluto are related, but that they are their own distinct planetary bodies. But of course, Hades and Pluto both relate to partially the transformation experience, which effectively is death, life, and rebirth. So death in this context is seen as a gateway to something new, and as a cyclical process. So Hades involved in a trine with an Aquarian lunar eclipse. One of the aspects that we need to look at when it's in Gemini is what we call the ego identity. Now, the ego identity is very important to understand when we're talking about personal transformations. The ego identity is a conscious, coherent sense of self, and that forms through the integration of our values, our beliefs, our goals, and the role that we play and are expected to play within society, within our family groups, within our tribes, as you mentioned. So we have this sense of self that forms through this integration of social influences and our own internal values, beliefs. This ego identity is at the core of self-assertion, of self-confidence. When we're talking about Mercury in Leo, when we're talking about Gemini being the place that we learn how to deal with the world, that third house experience, and we're talking about a transformation experience, this is what we're getting at, is this ego identity. Now, the ego identity is a developmental achievement that predominantly sort of kicks off and really crystallizes during that adolescence period, and we're going to get to see that with your daughter in the next 2 or 3 years. This provides that ego identity, which is formed kind of 10, 11, 12, 13, that we all have within us. This provides a stable sense of who we are, who we think we are, how we are perceived by others, and what we believe to be our place in the world. When we're talking about tribes and when we're talking about interacting with tribes, and you mentioned, a person coming to Nelson for the first time and looking for some groups and to interact with, that part of that is driven by how we see ourselves, how we think we are perceived also by others. That has a big impact on our motivations and the way that we deal with these tribal type issues. So this ego identity, which is very heightened, which is very triggered at this time, it also represents a person's inner reference point and an understanding of our unique individuality. See, part of the key also to understanding the difference between Leo, which is very individual, and Aquarius on the other side, is that there's a risk in Aquarius of the hive mind. And the easiest way to understand the hive mind is to watch, say, a flock of birds, and how if there's a big group of them, one will react and they will all react. That is the hive mind. Even though there may be nothing, if you watch birds very closely, it might just be a gust of wind and suddenly they're all flying off. This is the hive mind. And in the hive mind of Aquarius, we can lose the individuality of Leo. So finding the balance between our individuality or our ego identity, which is formed in childhood and then develops over our life, and then how that carries into the way that we deal with these tribes, with these groups and the collective, that arc is very important to understand at this new full moon. So this inner reference point, this unique sense of individuality is developed in this adolescent period. However, ego identity is not fixed and it continuously evolves. And a major development, obviously, during adolescence and then emerging adulthood. I mean, they talk about that age 21 as the coming of age. But there's also, the first Saturn return at 30, and then there's another coming of age at 40, and so on and so forth. So ego identity is not fixed and it continues to evolve. And the key here is to integrate our personal qualities, experiences, and values as we go through life. And our values may change, our perspectives may change, and being willing to pivot, if you like, being willing to be flexible. I touched before that one of the risks is with emotions, of deep emotions, and with the shadow side, is that we become fixed in our view, and we push back on people and we push back on things if they don't align with us. And sometimes that's valid and sometimes it's not. Understanding why we have those perspectives is to do with this ego identity. So this is the classic. You've got to go back to your childhood to understand a little bit about who you are today. And you'll look at your cultural experiences and your interactions along the way, and particularly at various junctures, 21, 30, getting married, your first breakup, graduating from school or university, getting your driver's license, all of that stuff, getting drunk for the first time. We've then got this Kronos energy. Now, Kronos relates very much to the collective leadership. So, whilst we have this emphasis on the individual and the transformation, at the same time, what's happening with this conjunction with Kronos and the trine with the full moon is that leadership comes front and center. And this is leadership in the perspective of the collective. These are political leaders and governance structures that we all adhere to or observe or are part of. Leadership within the domains of economics, of society, of academia, of law and order, of education, healthcare, all of those collectives, of religion, sports, business, public and private enterprise, not for profits, charities. There's a call going out to humanity from the cosmos that we need to look at transforming, renewing, and regenerating, changing and disrupting some of the low leadership structures that aren't serving humanity moving forward. So, in other words, a changing of the guard might be called for. There may be innovative ideas that allow humanity to restore this bottom up influence and control over, particularly the collective commons, as opposed to a top down apex structure, which is dominated by usually one or two people at the top or a small group. That is the absolute antithesis of Aquarius, of course. And finally, we've got this fixed star, Sirius. Now, Sirius we haven't talked about a lot, but this can be associated with fame, with fortune, with honor, and spiritual illumination. Sirius is said to blend the qualities of Jupiter and Mars, which means that it can bring both worldly success and profound spiritual growth. Of course, you've got Sirius as a
With my
conjunct one
moon.
of your moon, yeah. So Sirius is considered a star of great fortune and abundance. So the fact that it is involved with this lunar eclipse is a very positive sign. It's a very bright star as well when you look up and locate it in the night sky. And its conjunction with Hades and Kronos and Jupiter and a trine to the blood moon amplifies two things: our personality traits, but also leadership. So this is an opportunity for us individually and collectively. You know, they talk about the esprit de corps of cultures and how cultures are known. This is part of this because the culture is the collective side and the individual is an expression or a representation of that. So this presence of Sirius here grants confidence and charisma, and particularly for leaders, the ability to inspire others. Sirius is particularly significant for military figures, for lawyers and government officials, but its energy can also be dangerous when accompanied by excessive ambition, hubris, arrogance, hegemonic thinking. So its presence here at this eclipse can represent as much as a positive, charismatic leader or an amplification of your most positive skills. It can also represent a fall from grace, a public humiliation. What is happening on the world stage right now with prominent leaders is a good question to ask under an Aquarius blood moon. Are we aligned with them? Or is there a feeling in you as an individual and around you? And this is why talking about this is so important. Is there a feeling of unease, of disquiet, of discomfort? If there is, get those emotions to the surface and start talking about them. These emotions are signs of unrest emerging from within a collective unconsciousness represented by Aquarius. The concept of the Aquarian age symbolizes an upending of the status quo. And because of the energies of Kronos, which is leadership, and also Poseidon, which we won't talk a lot about today, but they're both related specifically, as is Leo, specifically to leaders. So leaders are front and center. If you are a leader or you're subject to a leader, these questions apply to you. The context of leadership involves governance structures. That's very much an Aquarian energy, particularly around areas of media, technology, electronic and digital commerce, which are the domains of Gemini and Aquarius.
Yes, I love that. There's so many good and bad information about Sirius, and it's that perspective, exactly the perspective. If your cup is constantly full, whether this is at your 18th birthday, at your first Saturn return, if you are not willing to hear someone else's perspective, then you're just close-minded and you're not able to grow as an individual in this lifetime. And you'll be stuck as that ego identity that was formed when you were between the ages of 5 and 7. And so I think having that willingness to learn, to grow, embrace 13 sign astrology, for example, where we talk about the true position of the planetary bodies and not this overlay of all these constellations being 30 degrees. It's shocking. It was shocking for me, David. It was maybe shocking for you as well. And then that realization of, oh my gosh, I was duped for years and years and years. And I can now fully understand that I am a Virgo sun and not a Libra sun. It makes sense, but I made it fit. And I'm sure the same is for you, especially with your Ophiuchus moon. It's this, wow, I get it now. But it takes courage. And if you're constantly in this echo chamber of people, whether that is in real life or on social media, of people that think the same as you, then you're not expanding your awareness and there's no reason for you to change your perspective. So have some courage, listen to people who you normally wouldn't listen to, and you don't need to bombard them with your perspectives, with your way of looking at the world. You could posed a question. Have you thought about, or can I share my opinion? And I think a lot of people are so scared of doing that and they don't want to impose, and then that's why they'll just walk away and, oh no, they don't want to know. They don't want to know that I'm not happy with the local government here because we've got elections coming up in New Zealand for our local government structures. And it's so interesting, we were talking about this, is that a lot less people vote in these local elections than we do for the national government. But our lives are affected a lot more by the people that are in this local government. So it's more important in a way that we share our voice now, that we have the conversations now. What do you think about such and such? Well, I've heard this and this. So have those conversations, get your thoughts broadened. That went on way longer than I was meaning to do. But conversations, we walk away from it, and it's sad, I think. So we have a lot to summarize. So just for me to quickly summarize, we have the moon at this lunar eclipse, which here in New Zealand happens on the 8th of September at 6:08 in the morning. It's 17 degrees Aquarius. It's making that trine with the stellium in Aquarius of fixed star Sirius, Kronos, Hades, and Jupiter. And then we also have spoken about the Sun and Mercury. Mercury sits at 21 degrees Leo and the Sun at 26 degrees Leo. So what would you like to bring up as a summary of this interesting reading?
Yeah, and there's Poseidon as well that we didn't touch on, but that's also in a trine too. So there's just so many energies. Again, a lot of astrologers won't talk about Poseidon, Hades, Kronos, or the fixed star Sirius, but these, particularly Hades, Kronos, and Poseidon, are what they call trans-Neptunians, and they are, as I've come to learn, they are the higher octaves of the underlying planets, well, not underlying, corresponding planets. In other words, Poseidon is related to Neptune, so it's a different or a higher octave of Neptune energy. So we've got some Neptunian energy, which is very high frequency. Aquarian, when you look at the clock or the houses, we're talking about the 11th and 12th house energies when we involve Poseidon. And as I said, I'm just touching on it. We're bringing in the 12th frequency, the 12th house frequency. So these are the resonances here and the energies here are aimed right at the outer edge of humanity, if you like. and the part of the collective, the genome that's pushing into change. And you mentioned before also about the echo chamber. Well, that's a great, and all of that you shared there was brilliant because that's exactly what Aquarian conversations are about. You know, we are like most nations around the world, especially in the West, but even in the East, it's these collectives that start within the communities that have discussions about the well or the water or the shared infrastructure or the school or the roading, as far as that's concerned. That decentralization is an Aquarian energy. Centralization is a Saturnian energy, and it's a patriarchal energy. Ground up, crowdsourced systems is Aquarian energy. And it starts in a home, and then it starts with a community group and a collective, and it spreads out from there. And you're absolutely right that the numbers that vote for the central government are up to twice that votes for local government, when in fact local governments here in New Zealand and in Australia and probably in the States, you have a different name for them, but certainly in the UK and Canada and other places, they have more influence over, the way the local water is run and the delivery to the door of mail and all sorts of things. So these are Aquarian energies. So that's what you shared there was awesome. Now, in summary, and as I said right from the very beginning, the full lunar eclipse, and if you have the opportunity, I know every part in the world doesn't get to see it, but I think we do. I was looking at the computer before and believe that we'll actually be able to, provided this a cloudless sky, we'll be able to see it. And it's just an eerie experience. That's been my own experience of these anyway. But a full lunar eclipse, of course, with the moon will be completely covered by the Earth's shadow, and the moon archetype is that of emotions and the unconscious mind, and the Earth represents our physical presence and temporal existence. And so, therefore, overwhelmingly, this is about an activation of the shadow self, both at an individual level and at a collective level. The shadow consists of the parts of ourselves that we consciously or unconsciously push away, those flaws, those negative emotions that we just don't want people to see. We don't want to be known for those things. But it can work the other way too, that some of us have got some very admirable qualities, and you talked about the word courage, right? That could be one. But some people have courage, but only in certain situations. So the shadow can, as much as it's the flaws and the negative side that we push away, and that's totally intuitively understandable, shadow can also involve those admirable, great qualities that we haven't yet integrated. We haven't figured out how to make them as part of our persona, of who we are in the world. So it can go both ways. This shadow, we often talk and you often hear in spiritual circles this idea of shadow work. Well, the shadow is the part of ourselves that we don't like, right? I've just touched on that. But it's called the shadow because it's these characteristics, these attributes, these traits, these values, these virtues, these beliefs, some of which can be cultural, importantly, as well. We inherit some cultural baggage that we may, as we get older, realize that I'm not part of my tribe here. That was great when I was when I was back home with the cousins and the uncles and the aunties, and we were sitting around having a barbecue and everyone believed the same. But now I'm out of my cultural group, for example, I feel like a fish out of water. That might be when the shadow side gets activated because we're suppressing a part of who we are. And the reason that we do that is because we want to fit in, to get along. So these aspects are very important to grasp and understand. When we banish a part of ourselves from the light of our conscious awareness. It goes into the hidden and the unknown, but here's something. The soul remembers. See, we might push it out of our mind, but the soul remembers everything. And the unconscious is like a record keeper of everything that happens. So, in fact, the shadow involves very much the intellect overriding the subconscious and almost acting like a limiter or a governor. You get these feelings that emerge, and the ego identity that I touched on before feels that and then goes, no, I need to suppress that. No, I'm not going to speak up, or I need to speak up, or I need to say something, or I need to not do anything. So that suppression of the shadow is all much, there's a filter in between the subconscious memories and the outer world, and it's that ego identity that I touched on that sits in the middle there, represented by the ascendant in the astrological mosaic. The shadow is the unconscious counterpart to the persona or the personality. It's the mask. Our persona or personality is the mask or image that we present to the external world. That which we believe is acceptable to the external world. That which allows us to get ultimately what we want. In astrology, that persona or mask is called the ascendant. And the descendant, which is on the other side, and the 1 and the 7 is the relationship here in astrology, but the descendant is the shadow side. That's the side that probably only a few people get to see. And I call it the public and the private face. We learn from a very young age, Gemini, which traits are acceptable. We learn that from parents and we learn that from society, and we repress those that are not acceptable, leading to the formation of our shadow self. So we all have this. This is a human experience, and not a one person on this planet can get away with this, because it is uniquely human experience. We all grow up, we all have these buffeting, if you like, from brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, uncles, teachers, schools, cultural groups, sports clubs, religious groups, and so on and so forth. What's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, buffers us as we're forming our ego identity in a very young age. We may grow up, therefore, we fear the consequences of revealing those aspects of ourselves, or that we fear the consequences of saying, I feel guilty or I feel shame about something. This isn't easy to do, by the way. Engaging in shadow work involves, therefore, exploring and acknowledging all those hidden parts that allow us, in doing so, to become whole and authentic. By integrating our shadow aspects, we bring our conscious and unconscious selves into alignment. And that leads to a more balanced and integrated personality ultimately. That's what we call the divine design. When the shadow is suppressed, however, it can emerge in unhealthy ways, sometimes as emotional outbursts, sometimes as sabotaging behaviours, imposter syndrome, or projections onto others. We often see that. Self-reflection is part of the answer here. You can ask, what is a process? What can I do? Dream reflections, self-reflections, journaling, meditation, mindfulness practice to uncover these hidden aspects of ourselves, to surface them, if you like. The goal is not to eliminate our shadow, but to accept and understand it, because integrating its energy into our lives in a constructive way is immensely positive for us. This is how we develop resilience. This is how we become really confident individuals that walk with a spring in our step, and we bounce through life. The process of integration of the shadow fosters self-forgiveness. That's a key piece. And compassion towards self and others who are going through it. And we recognize that the shadow, including its negative aspects, is both a natural and an integral part of being human, and part of the process of effectively growing up.
Yes, and you and I believe that we choose as a soul to be here to have this human experience. And sometimes I'm like, why am I here at this time? But I've heard other people say there were loads of souls lining up to come here at this time, and we were the lucky ones. So just think about that. Thank you so much, David, for sharing your wisdom when it comes to astrology. It's always lovely to get to know a part of your knowledge. I'm sure there's so much more you could have shared with us today. Of course, there is many, many planetary bodies we could have spoken about, but this is what was coming out for you at this time. So if this is the first time you're listening to us or watching us, you can find all our videos on YouTube. You can listen to our podcast on both Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Audible Podcast. You can order your true 13 sign astrology chart for a small donation, and we do natal readings as well. So thank you for being here. Please share our message with those around you and start a conversation. See if you can change people's perspectives. David, anything else?
No, that's all from me. Namaste.
Namaste. Until next time.